Hi everyone, I'm Noel,
I'm Hannah,
and we welcome you to
Hopeful
Hopeful
Writers
Writers
Studios.
Studios. Before we start our review, we would like to invite everyone to please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more of our movie reviews.
So please subscribe because we always try to do a variety of movies, and I'm sure there's always something for everyone. I think we can finally start our movie review for Pride and
Like
Prejudice.
this.
So this is the 2005 version, and it is based on the novel with the same name written by Jane Austen, and it is considered as one of the most classic period
Yeah,
movies of our time. Yes, so
yeah.
it's a really good
One of
movie.
the best ever.
But we'll get to that. So let's first discuss what the movie is about. So for those of you who haven't watched it yet, the Pride and Prejudice is set in the 19th century, and it focuses on the Bennet family that consisting of five daughters, and it focuses on their journey to finding love, true love, and marriage. Okay,
Yeah.
so although this ties in with her sister's stories, the movie focuses on Elizabeth Bennet, who is the second eldest daughter among among her oh no, four siblings rather. And
There are a lot. Four
yeah,
siblings.
they're all girls. I
Yeah.
can't imagine like having siblings who are all girls. I feel like it's gonna be pretty chaotic, I would say. There's a lot of them. And so in this movie, Elizabeth meets a man named Mr. Darcy, and they instantly form a sort of dislike of each other.
Oh.
And the movie focuses on their own pride, how they overcome their own pride and their own sense of pride, and their prejudices or initial impressions about each other, which
Oh.
are very negative because of their differing social classes. So
Oh.
Mr. Darcy is a rich man, and Elizabeth and her family are considered as perhaps maybe one of the lower um, types of family in the Netherfield where they lived.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
that's why the title is Pride and Prejudice. I never thought
yes,
of that. So they had to get rid, or they had to overcome their
yes,
pride and prejudice
yes,
towards
that's
each other
mhm.
to find that love for each other.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. I learned something new. So I didn't
Hmm.
know that. So that's okay. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a romantic story,
Yeah.
but it is a slow burn kind of love. So it's a very interesting uh, take, I guess,
Yeah.
on uh, how people found love in the 19th century, I
Yeah.
would say. And the movie also focuses on the other Bennet siblings,
Yeah.
like Jane, the eldest, and Lydia,
Mhm.
the
So
youngest.
Jane is
And
played by Rosamund Pike.
yes, she's
Right.
very good.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that she was there when I first watched it, and I was really surprised that she was there and she was playing
Yeah.
this
Me
sweet
too.
girl.
Me too.
Yeah,
So different
because
from her
yeah, from her
other
more
roles later
recent
on.
roles, yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see her in that kind of perfect woman persona. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So what's your overview review of the movie, Hannah? What do you think of the movie as a whole?
For me, I've always been a fan of period movies. I really like I really like the costumes and the dialogue, especially. I always look at the script whenever I watch
Yeah.
something old, maybe, because it's very interesting how they say things. Because again, it was way back then where
Yeah.
women are
Yeah.
expected to be courteous and polite all the time. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting how they
That's
actually
right.
say their feelings without going over the line of what is appropriate. So it's always interesting to see
Yeah.
the backhanded comments and whatnot whenever I watch something like it. And coming into the movie, I didn't really have any
Yeah.
expectations of it. I just heard that it was a really good um it was a must watch classic, and
Yeah.
so I went into it with no expectations at all, and I was surprised that it was very relatable and realistic in a way because of the characters of the heroines, Jane and Elizabeth. I think we could count Jane. So even though they're
Yeah.
very different characters, they're very close. They're very close as sisters, and they are each other's confidants, if you
Yeah.
will, and
That's
best
right.
friends. And
Yeah.
Jane is this sort of um, perfect woman or perfect wife. Uh, and while Elizabeth is more the liberal, free
Yeah.
spirited
Yeah.
of the two,
That's
and
right.
she's very witty and charismatic,
Yeah.
and she actually I think she scoffs at the idea of marrying for wealth, which is
Yeah.
very interesting because again, in during that time, I think their women's main goal, life goal, is to get married and have a family, and that's it. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting whenever a period movie sort of subverts that kind of expectation, like
Yeah.
uh, marrying for wealth. In this movie, they do marry, but it's for love. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
feel good movie in a way. What about you? What do you think?
It's a great movie. I like you said, I like how it brought us back into time, brought us back into 19th century England,
Mm.
and we saw we saw everything, all of the old traditions and customs that they had. Like they greeted each other as Miss Hannah and Mr. Noel, right? So every
Yes.
time they saw each other, they would always, they would bow, Miss Hannah,
Courtesy.
Miss Hannah.
Yes.
And then the women would like bow with, and then they hold their skirts or something,
Yeah, it's a
right?
courtesy.
Like, yeah, yeah. So I love that part. It's amazing to be brought back into time, into that
Mhm.
the time when there were no cell phones. So they would just appear at each other's houses whenever they want to,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
while they're at the garden,
Hmm.
they look around the corner of the
Hmm.
tree, and behind the
Hmm.
tree the guy is there or the woman is there, or they see
Yes.
each other.
Hmm.
They see each other across the river.
Hmm.
So it's a great time.
Yes.
The balls.
It's a small town.
It's a small town, and they just,
Everyone knows each other.
yeah. And when you see each other, it's like destiny because you keep on bumping. They keep on bumping into each
Ah.
other,
Yes, I think
right?
that's what happened with our characters
They
here.
keep they keep on bumping into each other. So it's like
Hmm.
destiny, and it's a small crowd.
Hmm.
They're going to a party, and it's the party of the guy, or it's a part. They're going to another party. The girl is there. So it's a very small community. It's really nice. So it's one of the best romantic movies I've ever watched,
Hmm.
and I think it's a really good movie because it's based on a beautiful novel, which is like one of the best English
Hmm.
novels. Is that correct? Like one of the best
Hmm.
British novels of all time. So now we're going to go into our story review with spoilers.
Uh-huh.
So what do you think, Hannah, of the story and the flow of the story?
I actually liked it. It was I think the pacing could have been a lot better, but considering that it spanned a long time, the movie spanned a long time, um, I feel like I was invested throughout, and
Yeah,
it tried to because it tried to like uh tackle so many different subplots with the
yeah,
sisters and um with the other bachelors. I think it could have easily been confusing,
yeah,
but I just found myself very invested in their own goals, at least for me, yeah. And uh the the conflicts were also very interesting, like the antagonists, the different antagonists in the movie. So uh people like Mr. Collins and Mr. Wickham and Caroline Bingley
yeah,
and Lady Catherine. I think all of them had very different uh goals in a way, and very different motivations as to why they're doing it. So for Mr. Wickham, he's trying to seek revenge on Mr. Darcy
Yeah.
for getting his inheritance,
Yeah.
and Mr. Collins just wants Mr. Collins just wants a wife.
Yeah.
uh Caroline Bingley, her motivation is that she's a rich snob. That's what her character
Yeah.
was.
It's right.
And Lady Catherine, while also being a rich snob, wanted Mr. Darcy have um to have an arranged marriage with her own daughter. So
Yeah. Who
in a
is
way,
his cousin, right? So that
yes,
would
I
be
think
his
I
cousin.
yes,
Yeah.
back then it was normal to
For
marry.
cousins.
Yes,
Yeah. So and
marry.
Mr. Collins initially wanted to
Yes,
marry Jane,
yes.
right? So
So it was very interesting how all these people, I think most of them are rich, I think. So most
yeah.
of them prevented the Bennet sisters from uh getting what they wanted. And it was very interesting too that the movie focused on an all girl household, because I think
Yeah.
the stakes are higher, which is why Mrs. Bennet acts a little crazy whenever there's the prospect of a
Yeah.
man wanting to marry one of
Yeah.
her daughters, because again she's desperate for her family
It's it
to be secure
That's right.
financially.
It's like it's the
Yeah,
only thing she's thinking of, right?
yeah, but
It's
again, I think it makes sense. I
yeah.
didn't find her annoying as Mr. Bennet probably found her.
I
Because again, I see why. Like, there's a lot of stakes into being an old maid, which was
yeah.
why Charlotte, Elizabeth's best friend, was also very worried about um her own standing in society uh as a single woman at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So there's just a lot of um, sort of um, feminist approaches about in the
Yeah.
movie. So I think it was very interesting to
It's
see the movie try to explore all of that.
uh
What about you, Noel?
like you mentioned, there's a really fun scene there where there was a funny scene there where Mr. Darcy and Bingley were headed to their house, to
Hmm.
the Bennett household, and they were doing, they were just lying around, but when they heard that Bingley and Darcy were there, they suddenly rushed, right, and tried to
Hmm.
fix the living room, and then they
Ah,
tried to
yes.
pretend that they were doing something else, like they were
That
reading a
was really
book.
funny. I remember that.
They suddenly set it up like it's scripted,
Hmm.
so they tried to like make the living room, and all of the Bennett sisters were there, and they tried to make it as presentable as it can. So yeah, I was just surprised how, like you said, how obsessed or how important it was for Mrs. Bennet to get
Mm,
her
yes.
daughters to marry.
Mhm.
You know.
Yes. I think the facade that the women have to keep up in the movie is also something that uh I liked about it, because again, uh, in period movies, again the women are more um, expected to act a certain way, and it's always interesting when uh, they're trying to again keep up appearances in the movie, even
Yeah.
though they either don't want to do it, or they don't mean whatever it is they're saying or
Yeah.
doing. So it's
Yeah.
again, I like that part about.
Yeah. What do you think of the relationship between Elizabeth and Jane?
Oh, I loved it. I always like healthy sister relationships in movies.
Okay.
Um, and again, because they're sort of both the main female leads in the movie, so I liked how different they were, but that they were very understanding of each other's feelings and
Yeah.
situations in a way. So they're very empathizing when it comes to their own problems. Like when Elizabeth sees how heartbroken Jane is over Mr. Bingley,
Yeah.
it's actually one of her um main hindrances as to why she doesn't like
Yeah,
Mr. Darcy. So
yeah.
that's how important Jane was to Elizabeth.
Like it
So
was a deal breaker.
yes, it was a
Yeah.
deal breaker for her. So again, it's realistic and relatable in that sense because again, uh, she the just the amount of support that she has for her sibling and what she gets from her sibling, uh, it's just very healthy and wholesome for me. I
Yeah,
loved it.
yeah, me too.
Do you have other thoughts about the movie?
I like the story of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we never knew we go as we watch the movie as we watch the movie. We don't know if Darcy and Elizabeth will really end up with each other. You know,
Ah,
it's like it's a will they or will they not. You know,
yes.
and I don't like we don't know also when will they next see each other because there
Mm-hmm.
were no cell phones back then. You know, so they would part, and we have no idea if they would see each other again,
Mm-hmm.
and they would just happen to bump into each other again.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes me see difficult, like how difficult courtship or romance
Mm-hmm.
could have been back then too. You know, with no cell phones and no computers, with communication very much limited. So yeah, I
Yes.
love the story. How we don't know if they're gonna end up together. How I love the scenery of the movie. It was really
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. The way they built up their relationship was really
Oh,
good.
over time. Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's even the way they interacted with the opposite sex. It was
Mm-hmm.
very reflective. It was a reflection of how it was back then. So I really like the story. I like the flow of the story. I like how we don't know if they're gonna end up together or not. I like the parts where they suddenly see each other, and the portrayal of the characters are very realistic. Like the part where Mr. Darcy would suddenly come to the house of Elizabeth, and then he has nothing to say at all,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then he would leave. So from the guy's perspective, that happens to us, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
then the same thing happened to Mr. Bingley towards the end of the movie, right? He went to Jane, but he can't say anything,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yes.
know, and then he had to leave. So it's not because Mr. Bingley doesn't like Jane. It's just because he's too shy.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens with us guys, you know. So I can relate to that a lot. So I guess sometimes like shyness can be mistaken for non-attraction,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So yeah, and I love everything. I love the part where it's just a really beautiful story,
Mm-hmm.
and they wrapped up all loose ends very well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm happy Mr. Collins got married too.
Yes.
You know, at least they all had a happy ending
Mm-hmm.
so far, I think. And then Lydia got married too,
Mm-hmm.
although not to a good person, but at least she got
Yes.
married uh,
At least you got married.
rather than just eloping. So that was a really funny scene because I
Mm-hmm.
thought like what happened? Why are they panicking? What's so bad
Yes.
about
Mm-hmm.
Lydia running away with Mr. Wickham? It's like the end. They acted like it was the end of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all crying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't understand that. Why were they like? Was it a loss of honor or something like that?
Mm. Ah, yes. So back then, it was very scandalous for a woman to be with a man without them getting married. So the fact that they eloped meant that they were just running away, and uh, y- it was a very negative it had a very negative uh impact on the family
Oh,
uh
okay.
because of it. So just I think historically, so the women can't are not allowed to like get pregnant or whatever else
Yeah.
if it's to a man that they are not married to. So that is why, because her elopement would mean the sort of downfall of the Bennet name. So it
Oh,
affects
okay.
the whole family. That's why they're
Oh yeah, all
uh
right. I didn't understand it because they were like
as
everyone was panicking. They were all crying. It was like the end
mhm,
of the world, and they were saying, "It's too late."
mhm,
You know, so that's why. And they were all relieved
Mm,
when Mr. Wickham actually married Lydia,
mm-hmm.
but it was arranged by
Mr.
Mr. Darcy, who paid for all the wedding expenses. So it's a really beautiful story. What are some of your favorite scenes in this movie, Hannah?
Uh, for me, the first one would have to be the ballroom scene wherein Mr.
Yeah, it's
Darcy
such a nice scene. Yeah,
and Elizabeth were dancing because again, just the visual aspect of it, like
yeah,
them being in a ballroom full of people, and then once they made the turn, it instantly transitioned to them just being the two of just being the two
yeah.
left in the room.
It's like just the two of them now.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I think in a
that's it.
way it kind of um s- sort of visualized what it's like in their what it was like in their heads, like there's the room is full of people but all they saw was each other kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
So
beautiful. That's
it was
beautiful.
very
Yeah,
romantic, and uh
yeah,
I don't know, I was just giddy about the whole scene. I was smiling, I think, when I first watched it. And
yeah.
uh yes, that's it, I think. It was just a very romantic scene all around. And
Right. And I was impressed how they were talking while they were dancing.
yes,
Right?
the
How can they
dialogue.
do that? Like, wow. Like they were so witty with
Hmm.
they were so
Always,
witty,
I think.
always like
Yes.
both of their characters, Mr. Darcy
Mhm.
and Elizabeth, they were so witty.
Yes.
And
Uh, mhm,
while they were dancing, so they were trying to talk while they were dancing,
mhm.
and they were flirting, and they had witty remarks and everything while
Mhm.
they were dancing. That
Yes.
was a beautiful scene. So that's how people meet each other back then, right?
Mhm.
Through
Yes, through
balls
balls. Yes.
and through
And
dancing.
social
Yeah,
gatherings. I think back then they had a lot of free time, so they just had a lot of parties basically, and then that's how that's how they got
yeah,
they found their
yeah. We should
true
have,
love. Or
yeah, we should have some of those again, because
well,
nowadays people meet other people, if not in coffee shops, but in also through bars. And it's very dark inside
yes.
bars. You can't see anyone.
But
It's
there's
very
dancing
dark.
involved,
But there's
so
still dancing involved. But you can't,
so
and you can nowadays in a bar, you can just come up to any lady and ask her, "Can I have this dance?" It's
mm,
like you just can't, like, or at least as a
it's
general rule, it's
mm,
difficult to suddenly ask someone, "Can I have this dance?"
hmm.
But it was more acceptable back then, right? Like to
Yes,
ask a stranger, "Can I
yes,
have this dance?"
yes. And I feel like back then the women are more obliged to say yes, even though they're not
Yeah,
really interested. Uh, yeah, so yeah, they're very different culture and time.
yeah.
What about you, Noel? So what are some of your favorite scenes?
So another favorite scene of mine was another favorite scene of mine was when Elizabeth went to Mr. Darcy's house.
Mm,
So that's the time when he finally got a glimpse of who Mr. Darcy really is, his personality, and he
mm-hmm,
finally saw even, and she saw, like, Elizabeth saw Mr. Darcy with his sister
mm-hmm,
who was playing the piano, and he can
mm-hmm.
see that Mr. Darcy was smiling. So I think this was one of the so it was great to see Elizabeth see that light side, that happy
Ah,
side,
yes.
the light side, the happy
Mm-hmm.
side of Mr. Darcy, and and Elizabeth ran away. So there's a lot of running in this movie.
Yes.
Like they run a lot through fields, through hills while it's raining. So it's a lot of running. So she ran from, like, the build. She ran out of Darcy's house to run away from Darcy, but Darcy runs after her, and suddenly tell her, "Miss Elizabeth," and then they finally have that talk. Because the last time they talked before that was when Miss Elizabeth turned down Mr. Darcy, right? So now, um, they had to talk again, and it was great to see them, like, reunite after such a long time. So And I also like every scene where what a person comes to another person's house unannounced. So I love that a lot. Like every
Mhm.
time, like because we don't have that anymore,
Mhm.
right? You can almost, it's not acceptable anymore, I think, for you to just drop by any friend's house
Mhm.
unannounced, right?
Yes.
But back then they can do it. So it was always interesting for me every time like Elizabeth goes to Mr. Darcy's house or Mr. Darcy comes to Elizabeth's house. So it's
Mm,
always interesting to me. How
yes.
about you? What's another of your favorite scenes?
Ah. Uh, I don't think we can talk about Pride and Prejudice without mentioning the most iconic scene, which is the
Yeah.
confession scene in the rain. So it was
Right.
very dramatic, as one could expect in like a slow burn love story. But for me, it was really perfect. Like the subtle uh, w- body language in. So as you mentioned earlier, like there's a lot of um, there are times when the man says nothing, but his eyes and his posture and everything else, it says a lot that he actually feels deep affection for the woman. And we can clearly see that in the confession scene, wherein Mr. Darcy was, you can really see how he's trying to restrain himself uh, from wanting to kiss Elizabeth, because of the, again, Elizabeth just rejected him. And
Oh,
it was, I don't know, I just love the acting and the dialogue in this scene. It was very
yeah,
uh it was it was perfect for me again. And I like how the conversation went down as well, because
yeah,
it was very restrained, in the sense that they were trying to dig at each other's flaws in a way, but they had to keep a sense of politeness to it. So
yeah,
they were really not saying what they meant, but but uh, you you just know what they were actually feeling. Like, you know that they both loved each other, but their initial impressions and their misconceptions about each other prevented them from saying from just accepting their actual feelings. So for
yeah,
Elizabeth, she just found out that Mr. Darcy basically sabotaged her sister and
yeah,
Mr. Bingley's
yeah,
relationship.
yeah,
And for Mr. Darcy, he was thinking that uh, Elizabeth was mocking him because she perhaps didn't really know him,
yeah,
and she she was just making lots of false assumptions
yeah,
about him. So I like how the as the scene progressed, they were sort of getting closer and closer to each other,
yeah,
until eventually, even though the answer for both of them was no, like no,
yeah,
they could not be with each other. They were there. The thought of like going for it was still there. Like you could see it in their eyes, like the way they drew closer to each other. It was ah, so romantic for me, at least. I have a different I have a different sense of romance in a
the,
way, in that way, I guess. But very beautiful scene
yeah,
and very good acting as well from both of the actors.
yeah. Kudos to Keira Knightley
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they already like their characters? Do you think their characters already like each other at that scene? Like, Elizabeth?
Uh,
Do you think Elizabeth already liked
yes.
Mr. Darcy at
Ah,
that moment?
for me, I think yes, but again, uh, or at the very least, she was drawn to Mr. Darcy and curious about what he's like.
Yeah,
And of course, obviously, I think she did want to get closer to him, but all their external circumstances sort of prevented that. Like
yeah,
her what she heard about him, because again, the reason why Elizabeth was so against being in her marrying Mr. Darcy was because of the rumors that surrounded him, like whatever Mr. Wickham said, uh whatever the friend said about uh him sabotaging Jane and Mr.
Yeah.
Bingley's relationship. So uh all sorts of things, but she never really tried to figure it out for herself or tried to hear out Mr. Darcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just very unfortunate that they had a lot of misunderstandings about each other. But yeah, for sure, I think Elizabeth already liked Mr. Darcy, yeah, in that scene.
So sometimes, so Mr. Darcy got rejected because of wrong impressions, something
Yes.
like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So guys can get rejected when women have wrong impressions or because of pride and prejudice. Yeah.
Because yes,
Or
exactly.
relationships don't work because of pride and prejudice sometimes.
Mhm.
You're right. It's a really beautiful scene, and after watching that movie, if you're like a hopeless romantic
Mm.
now, now you would want to have your own, conversation under the rain scene.
Ah,
So
if only.
yeah, also a beautiful scene. Another of my favorite scenes is when the final scene, like connected to the scene
Ah.
which you said, was
Mhm.
the final scene when Elizabeth told, what's the name of the old lady?
Lady Catherine.
Lady Catherine. So like the night before that, Elizabeth told Lady Catherine that he doesn't like Mr. Darcy, but then early morning the next day we can see Mr. Darcy walking towards Elizabeth, and he was walking that long road that I mean
Mhm.
and Mr. Darcy was walking that long that was taking a long walk through the fields to get to Miss Elizabeth, and that's when they talked, and that's the
Mhm.
final scene. So I love that scene. So in this final scene, Mr. Darcy comes up to Elizabeth and says this famous line, "You have bewitched me, body and soul,
Mhm.
and I love you. And I wish from this day forth never to be parted from you."
Mhm.
So, what do you think of this whole scene and how Mr. Darcy talked to Elizabeth?
Ah, I think this is the reason, like this point in the movie, I think that's the reason why a lot of women started wishing for their own Mr. Darcy because
Oh,
again, just how he approached Elizabeth in the scene, like he knew that uh or at least he was under the impression that Elizabeth didn't love him back. So he was very respectful about it in such a way that he asked if her feelings of maybe disdain was still the same, and if so, he would respect it, and he would respect her wishes and just you know go about his way.
yeah,
But and that if Elizabeth actually did fall in love with him already, uh and that's where the line comes in about Elizabeth bewitching him and him telling her that he loves her. So I don't know, the it's just very that scene alone sort of proves that uh the arrogance that Elizabeth thought was there uh wasn't really,
yeah,
or in a way, because he sort of um humbles himself in that sense for Elizabeth, so you can see how much both of them have
yeah,
changed, uh how their characters have changed and how their ideas of each other have changed. So
yeah,
uh, I just it was very,
yeah,
it was very gentle for me, the dialogue and the acting, and even with the silhouette of the sunset,
yeah,
uh, it's very
uh,
romantic.
yeah,
And it was
and
very early in the morning too, so it means that he was probably he was wearing different clothes. I think he was wearing these white uh, sort of loose fitting tops, so maybe it was his bed
just from
chamber
bed.
clothes. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah. He
maybe it was
just
his
got up from
pajama that he
bed
just
and then just
got up and then
walked.
yes, he just looked for Elizabeth immediately
Yeah,
after waking up, or if he, he even slept at all. So
Yeah.
you just, all those subtle things, I think, just makes the scene for me. It was a very
Yeah.
was a beautiful confession scene for me.
Yeah. So Mr. Darcy was like, I need to talk to Elizabeth now.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
walked up. Yeah. And so both of them humbled themselves
Mm-hmm.
in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think? And the reaction of Elizabeth to this final confession by Mr. Darcy was also really interesting. She took his left hand,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which and she said, "Your hand is cold."
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. What do you make of that?
Um, Again, it was a very indirect way again of saying yes.
Yeah,
So she
yeah.
didn't turn him away this time, and uh, I think
And she kissed the hand, right? Something like
yes,
that. Yeah.
I'm not even sure if it's like the first time that they actually, touched each other. That's out of the
Ah,
ballroom, something like
yeah.
that.
That's
So,
right.
it was how do I say it? Like wholesome. Like the touch there is wholesome. So they didn't really go for a kiss.
Yeah. Oh,
In that
yeah.
final
That's
scene.
right.
So the
She.
payoff that we were expecting w- didn't happen, but it was
Yeah.
still, I don't know, it was still just as effective, even though
Yeah.
it
Even
was
she just
more
kissed the hand.
yeah. Mhm.
But it was yeah, but that hand was kind of special throughout the movie because throughout different scenes we can see Mr. Darcy's left hand was shaking
Mm.
or something,
Oh, was it?
right?
Oh, I
Like
don't think I
when they
noticed that.
have like conflicts or something
Mm.
like something was happening to his left hand. Like his left hand, the camera focuses on his left hand,
Oh,
and then
I did not
uh,
catch that.
like when they first met he had like Mr. Darcy was acting as if he was not interested in Elizabeth, but then
Mhm.
he helped Elizabeth get on the carriage with his left hand, and then the camera
Ah.
focused on this left hand after. It's like it became a bit stiff or it shook a bit,
Mm,
and it's the same left hand that I noted that Elizabeth kissed towards the end.
mm,
So yeah, it's a different take. You're right. It's a very gentle take on love.
yes. Mm.
Yeah,
I think that's Elizabeth's way of sort of reassuring him that uh maybe like saying you don't have to worry anymore because
yeah,
I feel the same way as you do, something like that. So, I
yeah,
just with you adding the sort of recurring scenes with the hand, I guess that makes even more sense for the final
yeah.
scene.
So even though there was no kiss, it was like you said, it was just as effective. It was gentle
Mhm.
and yeah. So it was warmth, something like that. Like it gives a
Yes.
feeling of gentleness and warmth.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I also like the final scene too, where the I also like the scene where Elizabeth was now talking to her dad, and we haven't
Yes.
really heard his dad talk that much about
Mhm.
Elizabeth's love life,
Mhm.
right? And now, he was so happy to see that Elizabeth loves Mr. Darcy.
Mhm.
So it's just really interesting. Okay, five, four, three, two, one, action. So it's just really interesting to see that father-daughter moment
Mhm.
where Elizabeth tells her dad that she loves him so much.
Mhm.
Yeah. What
Yes.
What do you think of the? Yeah. See. Go.
Actually, I've also found it interesting that the movie didn't end with the final confession scene, or perhaps their actual marriage. So, uh, for me, actually, I don't know if I found it kind of awkward. Like it was just an afterthought that the last scene was her asking for her father's permission. I'm actually not sure about like how to feel about the last scene being neither uh focusing on Mr. Darcy's confession or their marriage. I don't know. What did you think about it?
I think it's interesting that I think most of the during that time, most of the romantic relationships happen with the people involved in the relationship talking
Mm-hmm.
first to the parents of their partners before actually falling in love with their partners.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool where what we have here is exactly the opposite, where you have Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth falling in love on their own, and
Mm-hmm.
then just afterwards, telling their parents
The
afterwards
order of things
the
in the
order of
relation.
things, like they
Mm-hmm.
reversed it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so funny how this time, like, they found true love not in the setting of their society, right? Because even their parents weren't 100% like immediately so happy about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they were surprised by it. Like they
Mm-hmm.
thought Elizabeth didn't like Mr. Darcy, or Mr. Darcy didn't like Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think it shows that true love, you can find true love in the most unexpected of ways, in ways
Mm-hmm.
that modern society, or the society that you're part of, won't immediately understand. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's important is you can find, like, open your hearts to true love in whatever way it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Even against Pride and Prejudice, or even against impressions by your family or other families, or even against your
Mm-hmm.
impressions.
Um,
Like, if there's true love, then just go for it,
mhm.
whatever it is. What do you think?
Yes, I think in that sense, yes. Now that you've explained it in that way, it it feels logical now to me that they ended there because again, throughout the movie, Mr. Bennett was a firm believer as well that uh, like there's really no sense of urgency for his daughters to get
Yeah,
married so soon. So he was one of those. He was the same as Elizabeth in that way,
yeah,
that he found it silly that Mrs. Bennett worried so much about marriage when I don't know. Just maybe the idea to him uh was weird, maybe.
yeah,
And uh, I think in that sense, you can actually see that he's the person that's going to be the most supportive
yeah,
of the marriage, aside from Jane, of course. But yes, in that sense, I think it's a very interesting take on like uh the father's role or
yeah,
say about the marriage. Hmm.
yeah. That's right. Well, who's your favorite character in this movie?
Of course, I would I would have to go with my girl Elizabeth
All
because
right.
again, she's a very subversive heroine. So she's witty and she's very uh outspoken in a sense. Like she actually tries to say what she means.
Yeah, yeah,
So she's honest in that sense and very what do you call it? She goes against social conventions in that sense.
yeah.
So
I
she
love how she answers back.
yes, she answers back and she doesn't just say yes, especially
Yeah,
with Mr. Collins. Like she uh she actually says no or tries to, and then she I think in that sense her stubbornness was her flaw, and that's where her pride sort of comes from. Like she just um believes so much in what she wants that she she's very closed off um to the prospect that maybe other people aren't as bad as she thinks,
yeah,
or the people that she likes may not have her best interests in mind. Like for example, Mr. Wickham, like she couldn't once her impression was made, she
yeah,
wouldn't change her mind. Like she didn't really believe that Mr. Wickham could be a bad guy until the very end. Um,
yeah,
so it's very interesting to see how she um, how she goes through life with that kind of attitude. But
Yeah.
her character wasn't at all what do you call it, like overbearing or annoying. Like for it's easy
Yeah.
for a character like that um to be a negative kind of energy
Yeah.
in the movie, for me at least. But she was just very light in this,
Yeah.
in a way, and relatable,
She's
definitely.
always
And
smiling, right?
yes,
A lot of time,
yes.
like like a lot of times in the
Mm-hmm.
movie, we can find her smiling.
Hmm. And I think it's also partly because of like the charisma of Keira Knightley as well. Like
Yeah.
she's very good at acting in period movies. A lot of times, I think a lot of her movies, I think, are
Yeah.
major lead roles in period movies. So I think she sort of mastered that kind of cheeky yet resolved
Yeah.
female
That's right. Yeah.
cheeky yet resolved heroine who goes against social standards in a sense,
Yeah.
even though she lives in a very patriarchal society. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
her character just really speaks to me in that sense, and I just
Yeah.
love everything about Elizabeth. What about you, Noel? Who's your favorite character?
Yeah. I just want to add to what you said. So Keira Knightley was like it was amazing in this movie,
Yes.
and she even got nominated for Best
Mm.
Actress,
Oh,
for a Golden Globe Best Actress for this movie. So it's
deserved.
so she was
Well deserved.
yeah, she was amazing in this movie. I also like the character of Mr. Darcy
Mm,
because I can very much sympathize with this character,
mm,
because he told his love to Elizabeth, and he was rejected by Elizabeth.
mm,
And even though he was rejected by Elizabeth through wrong impressions, and at the same time, he knew that somehow Elizabeth may be interested in Mr. Wickham, despite all of those obstacles, somehow he still pursued Elizabeth.
mm,
He still tried
yeah.
to like he never knew if he was going to see Elizabeth ever again, but he tried to fix things for
Ah, yes.
Elizabeth, right? Like he
Mm,
uh helped Elizabeth with Lydia and Mr. Wickham. He arranged for their marriage. He
mm,
tried to fix that, and then somehow, I guess he was instrumental in Bingley
yes,
reuniting with
yes.
Jane.
Mm,
And he did all of that even though he had no assurance that
mm,
Elizabeth would still like him or like him
mm,
back, right? Because even after he did all of that, when he saw Elizabeth at his house, Elizabeth ran away,
mm,
right? It was like Elizabeth was avoiding him. So I don't
mm,
understand it though. Like, why do you think Elizabeth kept running away from Mr. Darcy?
mm,
So yeah, that's why I appreciate his character, how he pursued that love. Because in real life, it's very difficult emotionally to pursue love, especially if that love is not being returned. If it's a
mm,
one-sided love, it's
yes.
not mutual. It's emotionally difficult for a person to keep going for that, to keep pursuing that love, or to
Mm,
keep doing something good for that other person. So it's that it might emotionally it's very difficult. But he really loved Elizabeth, and he overcame all of that, and he
mm,
just kept on pursuing her. And like you said, he did it in a respectful way.
mm,
So yeah, why do you think though
right.
that Elizabeth kept running away from Mr. Darcy, like
Mm.
some like or in the middle part of the movie, or just didn't want to confront him, something like that?
Is this the part where they visited his house and she was looking at his
Yeah,
statue and everything?
yeah, yeah.
I think it was mostly because she didn't expect him to be there, but
Oh,
she
okay.
wanted to know more about him, so she
Yeah,
agreed to actually go to the house, but she wanted to just see it from a far away position maybe, but she
yeah.
didn't expect that he'd be there as well, and I guess she was embarrassed in the sense that she got caught sort of trying to
Oh, okay.
know more about him. That's why she made those excuses about her auntie and uncle
Yeah,
inviting her to have a tour at his house. But for sure, I think Elizabeth really just um, had the curiosity
Yeah.
to know more about uh Mr. Darcy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What do you think of the technical aspects of this film? Like
Uh,
cinematography or everything?
mhm,
The acting, cinematography, the directing.
mhm. For me, I think what uh the the aspects that popped out to me while watching was two things. The first is or the first is the costume.
Yeah.
And then the second is the uh cinematography.
Yeah.
There were lots of so for the cinematography, there were lots of like landscape shots and silhouetted shots of um Elizabeth and the family, and even at the last scene, um it was a very um again, it was a very silhouetted shot with the sunset and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It
But
was beautiful.
it was it was really beautiful. And um there were, again, what you said, what you mentioned earlier, that there were lots of walking, so I think they had lots of room to sort of
Yeah.
showcase like a small town, rural
Yeah.
part of England in that sense.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite part about it was the same as you, actually, the parts where everyone is gathered at the house, because again,
Yeah.
it's always so interesting to see them level the Bennet sisters, because there's a lot of them, and then they try to fit them in one shot in the dining room scenes and
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
waiting room scenes. So every time that you see the Bennet siblings, uh, they were always included in the shot, in the sense that one of them is standing up and one of them is sitting down, and
Yeah.
it's just interesting how they always try uh to show them all in one frame.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah.
um for the costume part, I think uh the part about Elizabeth going against social standards was
Yeah.
shown through her dresses, because
Oh.
again, both of them, I'm sorry, not both of them. For every time that she comes on screen, I think she has a very disheveled look about her. Like her
Oh.
dress is dirty most of the time,
Oh, interesting. I
and
didn't notice that. Yeah, now that you
I
say it,
think
that's true.
Caroline
Yeah.
actually comments on it once in when she walked to the house. Like her dress was all filthy with mud, and again, it's part of why Carolyn looks down on her and her family so much, was because you can see it in the way they dress, in the sense
Yeah.
that they're dirty or not very womanly
Yeah.
in that sense. And it was interesting how they showed it, how they showed character through their clothes.
Yeah, it was. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Noel? What did you notice about the movie?
I love the cinematography of the movie just like you. I've never been to England or Great Britain, so
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool to see all of that. They have wide fields.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they
They
do.
have really wide fields. The architecture of the buildings was amazing. The houses look like castles.
That's true. Mr.
So
Darcy's house, especially,
yeah,
it was crazy big. It's
it
like
was crazy
castle.
big. Yeah, they look like medieval castles, which are really
Mm,
huge and very glamorous.
mm,
The hillside, the rolling hillside, the plains, it was all beautiful. I also like I like the same the camera I like the camera shot of the ballroom scene
ah,
where the
yes.
camera was just there was no cut. The camera just
Mm,
proceeded to go from
ah,
room to room.
yes.
It was a continuous long shot
Mm,
where it's like there's someone with a handheld camera and
mm,
she was just going from room to room, and we can
yes.
see all of these actresses, like all of the character what you can see what was happening to each one of the characters
Mm,
as the camera goes from room to room. Like
yes. The
we see,
simultaneous events happening
yeah,
in the
it's like
conversations.
it's
I
right, so
also love that.
it's like they're all it looked real, because everyone was acting at the same time. So
Mhm.
we get to see Jane and Elizabeth at the ballroom, and then the camera continues to go, and suddenly we see their mom spilling something,
Mhm.
right? And then so it was a great shot. I enjoy continuous shots because it gives that
Mhm.
sense of realism,
Mm. Things
where
happening in real time.
in real things are happening in real time simultaneously at the same time. So that was a
Uh,
beautiful shot. Also, the scene where Elizabeth was reading the letter from Mr. Darcy.
mm.
So I guess what happened there was Mr. Darcy dropped the letter for Elizabeth, and then suddenly he disappears, and then but his words were
Ah,
still
yes, yes,
were
yes.
still audible, so
Mhm.
we can hear him speaking as uh, Elizabeth was reading the letter.
Mhm.
So that
Yes.
was that was a cool scene. And
Mhm.
then uh, Keira Knightley is such a great actress.
Mhm.
I also like the scene where she was in a swing and she was spinning,
Mm.
right? And the
Oh.
background was like changing around her, something like that. So yeah,
Ah. Mhm.
really, there were the cinematography of the film, the camera work was really good.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
Hannah, what's your overall grade for this? What's your overall assessment of? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action. So Hannah, what's your overall assessment and grade for this movie?
I because this is one of my most favorite like films, I would have to
Okay.
give it like a 97 out of 100.
All right.
I think aside from everything that I've mentioned earlier that I like, I think just my own maybe comment on it, like it's just my own opinion that I feel like the part about Lydia's elopement came out of nowhere while I was watching it,
Yeah.
and it sort of made it hard to grasp the urgency of the scene because again it came out of nowhere that all of a sudden oh
Yeah.
she's gone, but uh I think with just oh never mind, maybe it was really the intention that she didn't know anything happening, she didn't know anything that was happening back at the house, but
Yeah. Was she the
yes, aside
youngest?
from
Was she the
Lydia's the
youngest?
youngest, yes,
Was she the
Lydia's the
youngest?
yes, yes, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yes. So it was just, I think it just contrasted a lot with like the very intimate scene with Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth, and then all of a sudden, hello, new problem.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Just the it was just a bit jarring, like the transition, but I think maybe that was the intention, and uh, for for a movie that was based on a novel, it just really um it was very easy to follow the whole movie, and again with the help of what you said earlier about the continuous shot, and you can get to know the characters. The reason why the movie was very easy to understand was because of scenes like that where
yeah,
they just sort of show the personality of the characters through the dialogue and everything else.
yeah,
So there's really a lot to like about this movie with its characters and the conversations and everything else. So for that, I'm giving it a very high score.
all right. I felt the same way as you when Mr. Darcy and then um Elizabeth finally got back together
Mhm,
after Elizabeth went to Mr. Darcy's
mhm,
house, right?
mhm,
So I thought that they were finally about to get together, and then the Lydia problem came up all of a
mhm,
sudden. So I was like, man, they're gonna get separated again because
mhm.
Mr. Darcy has to go away and look for Lydia.
Yes.
So yeah, but like I really love this movie, so I'm going to give this movie a grade of 97, just like you,
Yeah.
because I love this movie. It's really beautiful. Although I do feel that the ending could have been much more.
Mm.
I was looking for an additional scene after Elizabeth talked to her
Like
dad.
kind of like an epilogue on their love
Yeah,
story.
yeah. I wanted,
Yes.
like, throughout the whole movie was so witty, so I don't know, maybe even just a witty ending or a witty
Mm.
remark, uh, just an epilogue scene. But but it was good. I mean, I was just looking for another scene, but it's
Mhm,
okay, even though there
mhm.
was no other scene. So it's a really beautiful movie. So our final score for Pride and Prejudice is 97.
Yay!
Yay! So we highly recommend that you watch this movie. It's a really good romantic film.
So again, yes. So if you're looking for a period movie that will warm your heart, I think Pride and Prejudice is really the way to go. And even if you've seen it, just watch it again. That's how good it is.
Yeah. All right, and with that, we'll see you next time. Again, this is Noel,
This has been Hannah.
and we'd like to say have a good day. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.